Boyfriend made cruel jokes about replacing me when I got an interview for my dream job, leaving us on shaky ground. I recently landed an interview for my dream job, the kind of position that could alter the entire course of my career. I could see a future suddenly unfolding for me, a future with real growth, real possibilities. The salary would mean I could finally afford a home and start putting away money for retirement, things that have seemed like distant dreams up until now. To top it off, it comes with benefits that would improve my quality of life in ways I've only imagined. The catch? It's in another state. That fact lingered in the back of my mind, but before applying, I turned to my boyfriend to see if he'd consider moving with me. When he said yes, I felt reassured. I went full speed ahead, applied, and when I got the interview I was elated, truly buzzing with excitement over the possibility. At first, he acted supportive, but once the process became more real, when I cleared the first round of interviews, he changed. The excitement I wanted to share was met with coldness and, honestly, some mean responses. Suddenly, instead of being happy for me, he pulled away. I could tell he wasn't happy. Whenever I brought up the job, his mood soured. I was left holding all my excitement alone. Then we went out one night to a bar with a mutual friend. I couldn't help it, I told our friend about the position. He asked when I'd have to move if I got the job, and before I could finish, my boyfriend jumped in. Just enough time for me to find a new girlfriend, he said, with a bitter smile. He cracked a couple more jokes about getting a new girlfriend, all in front of our friend. I tried to salvage the situation, telling him I would want to take him with me, but he shook his head and said, "No way am I doing that." I felt hurt and embarrassed. The moment stuck with me, the disappointment heavy in my chest. When we got home that night, the tension boiled over. We argued. He told me, outright, that if I got the job he'd probably break up with me. He accused me of being distant, of running away from him. I was blindsided. How could he think that? I thought we'd been in a good place, and I've always made it clear that I wanted him by my side if this ever became real. I tried to remind him that, until now, I've been applying mostly to jobs in our state. This one was the rare exception, a huge opportunity, one I couldn't let slip by. But the negative reaction continues. The anger, the sense of abandonment, these have cast a long shadow over what should have been a joyous milestone. Frankly, I feel unsupported and alone. I never imagined that something so exciting could turn into a source of pain and conflict within my relationship. I haven't even been offered the job yet, but everything already feels so tense and uncertain. I keep racking my brain for ways to handle this, to hold on to both my happiness and my relationship, but right now, it feels impossible. One detail that might matter, he's looking to change careers himself, to move into a new industry. The city this job is in? There are major opportunities for him, too. His skills would be in high demand there. I wish he could see the possibility, the adventure, instead of just the ending. But at this point, I'm not sure how to bring him back to my side. Update 1. The job offer in front of me was truly life-changing, nearly 6 figures, full benefits, equity in a fast-growing company, and the kind of name recognition that could unlock any door I wanted for the rest of my career. At my current job, I was scraping by without health insurance, no real benefits, and after a year, maybe even 2, of stagnation, I felt perpetually stuck. I'd sent out resumes all over town, desperately trying to claw my way out, but every single week I was getting 2 or 3 rejection letters, sometimes more. I was being turned away everywhere I tried. Meanwhile, my boyfriend had hit a wall at his job. He'd reached the absolute cap, they wouldn't pay a cent more no matter how much he hustled. His salary was already much less than what this new role would give me, and even though he wanted something new, every door seemed closed for him, too. We'd been together for just under 2 years. There was a time when I fell apart, emotionally. Old childhood traumas started to resurface, plunging me into a haze of depression, relentless anxiety, and panic attacks that made even daily life a struggle. We lived far from where I grew up, my friends and family were distant memories, unreachable, leaving me isolated with no one to lean on. He wasn't prepared for any of it. I felt I couldn't open up to him, especially about the darkness from my childhood. If I tried, his own insecurities would flare, he'd lash out, even verbally, and in those moments I felt like I was raw and exposed, with nowhere to hide. A vicious cycle took hold. The less safe I felt, the more insecure he became, and the more he lashed out, the less I could trust him with my feelings. It got so bad that I began to wonder if I needed to go home, back to the people who had always supported me. I honestly can't describe how close I came to completely unraveling. It was as if I was losing myself, going crazy bit by bit. But all that pain made my boyfriend even more insecure about our future. At some point, I realized I had to help myself if I was going to survive. I went back to therapy, started attending support groups, got on medication. Over time, he began to show more patience, letting me speak openly about my demons without snapping or withdrawing. It was like the clouds finally broke, we found a new rhythm, rediscovered our happiness and fell in love all over again. For the first time in ages, we were both excited for what was coming next. Update 2. We ended up signing a lease together and moved into this absolutely amazing apartment nestled in our favorite neighborhood. At first, everything felt perfect, almost too good to be true. I was truly thrilled for us. But then, not even a week into our lease, I got a call that changed everything. I was offered my dream job. I couldn't believe it. I cried tears of joy, immediately called my parents, and they cried too. My friends? They told complete strangers about my new job because, honestly, it really was that big of a deal for me. When I told my boyfriend, I was so overjoyed I could barely contain myself, telling him all the things I was looking forward to now that I'd be making real money. I talked about everything we could do together, all the ways this job could move our future forward. But his reaction devastated me. It would be a huge understatement to call it a poor reaction. He was angry and crushed. In what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life, everything fell apart, 2 straight days of crying, harsh words, and a storm of anger. I kept trying to talk things through, outlining every way we could still make it work. When he asked, "Are you really going to take the job?" my answer was immediate, "Yes, of course. I have to." He saw my decision as a betrayal, as if I were abandoning him and our relationship for a paycheck. I honestly thought we worked through it and that things were on the mend. I left for a trip I'd planned months earlier to see my family for my birthday, thinking some space might help us both clear our heads. Instead, the messages didn't stop. He sent me wall after wall of texts, blaming me for ruining his life, for using him as a stepping stone, for tossing our relationship away in favor of money. He accused me of always wanting to get away from him, used my past mental health struggles as proof that I had never fully committed and was always looking for an out. According to him, I was bailing on our life together, and the whole job thing was my plan all along. Becoming his emotional punching bag was the last thing I ever expected. It was my birthday, my Saturn return, of all things, and I could see he was hurting. So, I called him. I walked him through his own dreams, told him about his potential career paths and how I could help, using my knowledge and experience to help him take those next steps. I was such a proud partner in that moment, seeing him want to better his life despite feeling so down. I couldn't help but share my pride with my family, feeling hopeful that he was finding his path. Only, the next day, it started all over again. More anger, more bitter texts, more cruel things he said about me and to me. I ended up sobbing to my parents, utterly heartbroken and disappointed. Eventually, he apologized, but I told him I didn't recognize who he had become. This wasn't someone I wanted to be with, and he promised the behavior would stop. I tried to be understanding. I acknowledged how hard this was, how crappy the timing was, how valid all his feelings were. But I couldn't keep letting him take his pain out on me. I told him I wouldn't keep letting myself be punished for my happiness. He agreed, at least, that's what he said. When I asked what he'd do to keep it from happening again, I was hoping for therapy, but he just said he'd start working out more. Of course, nothing changed. The cycles of texts continued. He insisted that if I really loved him, I'd turn down the job. No matter what I said, I couldn't convince him that this had nothing to do with my love for him or my view of his worth. I wanted us to both thrive, to pull each other up. But he couldn't, and wouldn't, hear me. Finally, it came down to a brutal ultimatum. It's me or the job. He told me he needed a year in the apartment to feel secure, that my getting this dream job meant I could surely find something just as good where we lived. I accepted the offer. We broke up. I canceled my return flight and moved back in with my parents. The most ironic and painful part? Because of the Delta variant, I could be working remotely up until February 2022. Maybe I couldn't have given him that full year, but I still could have been with him for 6 months. Update 3. I started my first day at my parents' dining room table, laptop perched on a stack of old cookbooks so the camera wouldn't catch the floral tablecloth. I clicked into a sea of unfamiliar faces, and the VP of my team said, "We're so happy you're here," in this genuine way that made my throat go tight. Benefits kicked in day 1. My badge photo was terrible. I didn't care. I closed my computer that night and just sat there, palms pressed to the wood, feeling the hum of a different life under my hands. The logistics, though, turned into a second job. Our names were both on the lease, I was an hour away and my things were still there. He wanted me to keep paying half for the full year, called it the consequence of making a decision without him. I offered to help find someone to take my place. He said no, he needed a year in that apartment, that exact apartment, like it was proof that I hadn't broken anything beyond repair. The landlord was practical. If I brought them a qualified tenant and paid the fee, they'd let me off the lease. So I did. I spent one late night after onboarding writing the kind of ad I'd once written for myself: sunny windows, walk to coffee, quiet building, good bones, and within 48 hours I had 3 people with pristine credit and references. Week's end, the landlord sent over a release. My phone lit up with his name almost immediately. "So you just replaced yourself?" he wrote. "In my own home?" I stared at the message and thought, yes. I still had to get my things. I picked a weekday afternoon, asked a mutual friend to come sit in the car with the engine running. I didn't want a scene. When I got there, the entryway looked new in microscopic ways. A second bike leaned against the railing, sleek, small frame, a bell I didn't recognize. On the shoe rack, unfamiliar sneakers in my size. When I opened the door, 2 mugs with lipstick on them were sweating on the coffee table, and my sage green throw blanket was folded over a pair of legs that weren't mine. She stood up so fast the blanket slid to the floor. She was wearing my college sweatshirt. She said my boyfriend's name, then, I'm his girlfriend. She said it like an apology and a dare. A month ago, he needed a year. A week after he told me I'd ruined his life, there was a girl in my sweatshirt in my living room. He walked out of the bedroom a beat later, hair wet, eyes wide. "You said 3, he snapped, like I was a delivery that came early. It took me a second to swallow the heat in my chest. I told him I was just there for my boxes. He started to talk about how hard it's all been. I looked at the coffee table and saw my favorite mixing bowl being used as a planter, dirt caked up the sides. The succulents looked great. I picked up my books, my winter coat, the framed photo of us in better light. My hands were shaking, but I kept moving. She stood to the side and asked, in this small voice, if I needed any help carrying. "I'm good," I said, and somehow I meant it. I loaded the car. My friend put a hand on my shoulder and I let out a noise I didn't recognize. When I finally sat behind the wheel, my phone buzzed. "I didn't want you to see that," he texted. "It's not like that." In the space between 2 stoplights, another one came in. "You did this." Back at my parents', I opened a box to find the things he decided were mine. A tangle of chargers that weren't, an old wristwatch he'd never worn, and a letter. I panicked. It started. It ended with, "If you ever loved me, don't move." I slid it back in the box and carried the whole thing to the garage. Work kept expanding to fill the places that used to be us. The company flew me out for an on-screen shoot for a project I'm leading, put me up in a hotel that overlooked the exact skyline I used to daydream about. I walked the neighborhood alone on my lunch break and found a bodega that smelled like cardamom and newsprint, and a tiny bookstore with a sign in the window that said, "Saturn return readings on Sunday." I bought a notebook and wrote down the names of streets I wanted to learn by heart. The recruiter pinged me about a relocation stipend. "No rush," she said. "But when you're ready, we'll support the move." For the first time, the word ready wasn't a cliff edge, it was a soft, solid step up. A week later, he sent a spreadsheet. Dollar amounts, dates, a sum at the bottom circled 3 times. He wanted me to reimburse him for emotional distress and the cost of a new rug. He said I'd chosen money over love, so I should have plenty. I drafted a response twice and deleted it twice. Then I forwarded the landlord's release and a copy of the subletter's approved application. I settled my obligations. "Please direct any future communication about the apartment to them," I wrote. It felt cold and clean, like a sink turned off after running too hot for too long. He started circling me online instead. I'd open LinkedIn to upload a project and see one profile view from someone in your network and know it was him. A mutual friend texted to ask if I was okay. Apparently he'd told people I'd plotted this whole thing, that I'd been interviewing for months, that I'd moved back in with my parents not because I was heartbroken and stubborn about my boundaries but because I was calculating. The friend from the bar, the same one who'd heard him joke about finding a new girlfriend, helped me carry my last box into the house and said quietly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he was already seeing someone." I stared at him. "He told you?" He shook his head. "He told everyone. The company asked if I'd be willing to speak on a panel for new hires about non-traditional paths. I said yes. On the call, a woman asked me what it felt like to make a big life change when people around you didn't approve. My answer came out steadier than I felt. It felt like being very small for a long time, and then noticing the room had a door. Afterward, my manager DM'd me a link to an apartment building 2 blocks from the office. "Big windows," she wrote. I scheduled a tour for the following week and signed a lease the same day. There's a lemon tree on the balcony and a corner of sunlight in the living room that belongs to no one but me. The night I signed, my phone lit up one last time with his name. "I got an interview in your city," he said. "Maybe this is a sign. Maybe we can start over there." I stared at the blinking cursor for a long minute. My hands didn't shake. "No," I wrote back. "You always could have come. You chose not to." He called me immediately. I didn't pick up. I put the keys from our old apartment, the ones that had sat heavy in my coat pocket for weeks, into a plain envelope and dropped them in the mailbox the next morning. On the walk back, the air was new and sharp, and for a second I could taste the exact future I'd been trying to protect. I went inside, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Update 4. I moved in on a Wednesday because I liked the way the city sounded on a weekday afternoon. Delivery trucks with their doors slapped open, a kid on, a scooter clattering past, a radio somewhere humming Motown thinly through a cracked window. The super handed me the keys and pointed at the lemon tree like he was introducing me to a neighbor. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and sun-warmed dust. I put my mattress on the floor and ate my first dinner cross-legged in the corner of light that I'd already started thinking of as mine. I slept for 9 hours without dreaming. At work, the project that had lived as a neat bulleted plan on a slide deck lurched into actual life and made a mess. An executive demo got moved up a week without warning. A vendor missed a handoff. A file that should have been easy turned out to be 12 incompatible versions of itself. Old me would have cried in a bathroom stall. New me booked a conference room, ordered pizza, and told everyone we were locking the door until the build clicked. At midnight, when the monitor finally showed what we'd promised it could, the VP did a little fist pump he'd deny if I told anyone. The next morning, my name was in an all-hands email. My mom printed it and stuck it to the fridge like we were back in 4th grade. On Sunday I went to the bookstore with a sign about Saturn Returns because the window had started to feel like it was looking straight at me every time I walked past. The reader was a woman in a blazer with a paperclip holding back her hair. She didn't do theatrics, she looked at my chart and then looked at me and said, "Sometimes you think you're falling and you're really just feeling gravity for the first time." I bought a paperback on sale and a postcard with a painting of 2 lemons on a plate. I taped the postcard to the inside of a cabinet where only I would see it when I reached for mugs. He texted the day after the demo, "I'm in your city on Tuesday for an interview." It popped up between a calendar update and a Slack ping. No hello. No question mark. I turned my phone face down and watched the bubble go away by itself. He tried again an hour later, "We should talk," like time had been a rubber band and not a road he'd stepped off willingly. I didn't answer. On Tuesday, my intercom buzzed while I was untangling an extension cord. I froze and then hit the audio. A male voice said my name and then, "It's me." I stared at the lemons and felt this steadying click happen inside my sternum. "This is not a good time," I said. "Please don't come here again." He laughed in this way I used to think meant he was trying to soften something sharp. "I'm in the neighborhood," he said, like that was an apology and not a statement of geography. The super popped his head out from under the stairs 3 floors down and shouted up, "If you don't know them, don't buzz them in." I didn't. He called once, I let it ring. Then the building was itself again. 2 days later a certified letter slid under my door with a satisfying official thwack. He'd actually filed a small claims suit. Dollar amounts, a date circled, damages handwritten in a tall, choke script I recognized from grocery lists. The list included the rug. It included pain and suffering with an amount next to it that could have paid for a long weekend in Miami. It included a lost deposits line that wasn't even numerically possible. I put the paper on the table and laughed once, too hard, and then I made a folder and called a number on the court's website. The woman on the phone told me where to show up and what to bring, and she sounded so bored that it made my shoulders drop 2 inches. Boredom felt like a blessing. Court looked exactly like television if television had worse lighting and more coffee breath. He was already there when I found the right door, sitting on a wooden bench in a shirt I had bought for him at an outlet mall. His knee was bouncing. A girl next to him in my old college sweatshirt had her hands in the pockets and her chin up. She gave me a little nod like we'd been introduced at a party. He stood up as if to hug me and then thought better of it midair. "You look different," he said, and I said, "I am." The judge listened to him first. He talked a lot about betrayal and promises and what he'd set up for us, and then the judge held up a hand like she was stopping traffic. "This court doesn't adjudicate heartbreak," she said. He tried again with the rug, with his spreadsheet, with the phrase emotional labor deployed so badly it made my eye twitch. I handed over the release from the landlord, the lease termination, the subletter's approved application, a copy of 3 months of my rent checks that never bounced and one email from the landlord that literally said, "She has satisfied her obligations." The judge flipped through, made a note, capped her pen, and said, "Dismissed." It was as gentle as a door shutting in a draft. He sputtered something about appealing. The girl in my sweatshirt looked tired in a way I recognized from my own mirror last fall. By the time we were through the metal detector again, he'd stormed off into a phone call, and she was next to me on the steps like we were about to share a cigarette. She held out a canvas tote. My sweatshirt was folded inside, the drawstring little knotted balls the way I used to do it without realizing. "He said you didn't want it," she said, and I said, "Thank you," because I did. "I'm sorry," she blurted then, voice small. "He told me you." "I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter what he told me." She rubbed her thumb against the strap of the bag. "He said you'd tell everyone I stole him. He said I should expect you to go crazy on me." She looked at me like she was bracing for impact. "I'm not going to go crazy on you," I said, and it hung there between us for a second, so simple it made the whole world feel rearranged. "I hope you're okay." Her eyes got shiny. She said, "I might not be," and then, "I thought I was rescuing him." I almost laughed. "Me too," I said. We stood in silence while a bus wheezed and a man walked a dachshund in a tiny coat. She looked at me one more time, like she was memorizing a route, and then walked away. He texted the word monster before I got to the corner. I blocked his number on the sidewalk, the sun bright white off the courthouse glass. Work kept unfurling. I started waking up before my alarm without worry clawing up my back. I got an email from a woman in a different department asking if I'd be her mentor because of the panel. The idea made me want to duck under my desk and also cry. I said yes and put intro call on our calendars. I set up a 401k and tried not to text my college roommate like I'd just discovered compound interest. I went to a sample sale and bought 1 outrageous blazer and 3 plain t-shirts. I signed up for a library card the same day I bought a hammer and a basil plant. I kept running into the city like it was a person I wanted to date slowly. I learned the name of the bodega cat who slept on the stacks of Goya beans, Martha, and the barista at the place on the corner started putting a lemon slice in my water without asking. A neighbor on my floor knocked on my door to ask if my Wi-Fi name was the one with a pun in it. We stood in the hall barefoot at 10 at night and compared routers like we were talking about pets. He turned out to be a pianist. Through the wall some nights I could hear scales so clean they felt like someone drawing a straight line in the air. He tried to route around the block. A LinkedIn invitation came from a fake name with an identical profile picture to his college cousin's dog. An email landed in my work inbox from a burner that was just his initials and the year we met. "We're on the same train anyway," it said. "We might as well get off at the same stop." I forwarded it to HR and then sat on my hands until I got a reply. Legal phrases I didn't know how to hold: documented, escalate, building security notified. The head of people pinged me and asked if I wanted to add a note to my file about not wanting visitors. A man in a blue blazer started sitting in the lobby between 8 and 9 for a week like Santa Claus if Santa Claus had an earpiece. The earpiece made me feel silly and protected in equal measure. On the first warm Saturday, I took my sweatshirt and a book to the park and fell asleep on the grass with my hand on the page. A dog licked my ankle and the owner apologized and I said, "No, please, I needed that." When I got home, the lemon tree had 3 new flowers open, white and stubborn and sweet. I brought one of the lemons inside and cut slices for my water like it was a holiday. I pulled my favorite mixing bowl, the one that had been a planter in another life, out of the dishwasher, where it had been drying from a deep scrub. I made batter I could do from memory and slid a cake into the oven without measuring anything with fear. Late that night, a DM came from the mutual friend, the one from the bar. "He didn't get the job," it said. "He's going back home." Then, a second later, "He told people you got him blacklisted. He told people you called his would-be boss." I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling until my eyes adjusted and the little cracks looked like a map. I turned my phone over and put it face down on the floor. I didn't correct the story. I didn't pick up the threads like they were mine to knit into anything. The next morning, I took the train 2 stops too far on purpose, just to see what was there. Street art. A tiny park with a broken fountain. A man selling mango slices in cups. I bought a cup, sticky sweet, and ate it walking back, thinking about how many times I'd tried to build a future out of someone else's certainty. I got home and there was a package at my door with no return address. Inside, the mixing bowl twinned to mine, brand new, and a note in tiny neat handwriting. "For cake that isn't dirt," it said. No signature. I put it in the cabinet next to mine like they'd always been meant to be side by side. The first night it rained, the lemon tree caught the drops like beads and the whole balcony smelled like someone had juiced hope into the air. I stood in the doorway with a towel around my hair and listened to the pianist practice a piece I couldn't name and watched the streetlights turn the wet world into a kind of myth. My inbox pinged. An invite, off-site, leadership training. I thought about how far a year used to feel. I thought about the door the bookstore woman had talked about. I thought about the girl on the courthouse steps and the way she'd said, "I might not be okay," like naming a wound could be the very first stitch. Update 5. The off-site was in a hotel with carpet so aggressively patterned it could induce a migraine if you stared too long. They gave us lanyards with our names in a font that wanted me to trust it and cold brew that tasted like someone had dared it to be brave. We did the thing where executives say words like North Star and someone draws a circle on a whiteboard that is supposed to be a funnel but looks like a sad tornado. In a breakout, I ended up with a dry erase marker in my hand and a room full of people watching me connect boxes that had been floating apart all quarter. My throat did that old tight thing for a breath, then it didn't. I drew the line, and then another, and the room made that small noise people make when a lid finally twists loose. That night, they put a speaker on a stage to tell us about resilience, and I sat in the second row eating a grape with the concentration of a jewel thief and realized halfway through that I wasn't testing myself anymore. I was just there. When I finally flipped my phone back on in the elevator, there were 4 missed calls from an unknown number, a voicemail from the super that started with, "Hey, sunshine," and a text from HR that said, "Stop by when you're back." The super's message: someone had left a wrapped package for me with the doorman and insisted it be placed on my floor. He'd said no and put it in the office downstairs. Didn't like his vibe, the super said, and then, "I bought a new bulb for the stairwell by the way, it was making everyone look haunted." HR was calmer than my insides. Legal had sent a letter after the emails and the lobby drop-in and the burner nonsense. If there were any more attempts at contact, we'd file for a protective order, and they'd connect me with a victim advocate who could walk me through it. The woman from legal said, "This is routine," in a voice that made it feel like a pothole and not a canyon. Routine sounded like a handrail. I picked up the package with the super and a security guy watching like we were on a game show. It was wrapped in brown paper and actual twine, the kind that lives in kitchen drawers with rubber bands and coins from countries you've never been to. Inside, a flash drive labeled US in silver pen and a letter on notebook paper folded into quarters. The first line was "This is what you're throwing away," and the last line was "Do not involve strangers in this." I put the letter back without reading the middle. The security guy said, "We can store it if you want, in case the court asks." My body had already said yes. We filed the paperwork 2 days later under the kind of lights that buzz in a way that makes you wonder if all the tired you feel is actually just electricity. The advocate who met me at the courthouse wore a cardigan and shoes that looked like she could walk forever. She handed me a pen that wrote smoother than any pen I owned and explained what would happen like she was drawing me a map. "You'll tell the judge what's already in writing," she said. "You don't have to perform pain to be believed." I didn't know I'd been storing breath in my back until it slid out. He showed up in the same shirt from Small Claims, wrinkled at the cuff like he'd rolled it and unrolled it while deciding what kind of man to be. He had a folder full of emails he'd printed out that made him look busy and rational from a distance. The judge glanced at his stack and then at the advocate's notes and then at me. I told her about the intercom, the letters, the package, the burner email at work, the story about blacklisting, the way my chest had started scanning doorways without permission. He started to talk about misunderstanding and love and our history like he was trying to sell the room a travel package. The judge put her palm up in a way that made every molecule in the courtroom listen. "We are not here to edit your memories," she said. "We are here to set a boundary." She granted the order. 1 year, stay away, do not contact. I didn't realize I'd been holding onto the arm of the chair until I stood and my fingers left small crescents in the wood. In the hallway, there was a flash of the sweatshirt again and a girl who was still so young it ached to look at her. She kept her distance like she'd read the same law. She didn't say his name. "He told me you made everything up," she whispered, voice so quiet it was like she was practicing not being heard. "He told me you wanted drama." She swallowed. "He also told me he still loved you." In the same sentence. Something inside me that used to be a rope got very quiet. I said, "You don't have to tell me anything." She nodded and then shook her head as if she was correcting herself. "The bowl was from me," she blurted, eyes on her shoes. "I thought you'd know. I wanted you to have one without dirt." She half smiled, small and crooked like a paper cut. "I left," she said then, so softly it was almost the sound of air leaving a room. "I'm going to my sister's. I don't think I'm okay." I told her about support groups that met in church basements that smell like coffee and floor cleaner. I told her about therapy, and about the way sleep can come back like a shy animal if you sit still long enough. She looked at me like I was either a lighthouse or a trick, and maybe I was a little of both. We stood under a no smoking sign, not smoking, and when she finally walked away I had the dizzy sense that whole lives reroute in spaces like this, with institutional carpeting and a view of a parking lot. Work didn't pause for any of it. The panel I'd said yes to turned into a workshop, and the workshop turned into me with a dry erase marker again, diagramming mess into motion. A senior director sent me a calendar invite called Skip, which would have made me nauseous 3 months ago and now just made me check if my eyebrows needed tidying. He wanted me to lead a pilot team. "You're already doing it," he said, and I thought, this is what it feels like when the room you've been in the whole time finally turns its lights up. I slacked the woman I'd agreed to mentor and we picked a time and I put on my outrageous blazer for a meeting no one would see waist down. Back home, the lemon tree went from flowers to actual, tiny knobby green lemons like someone had glued marbles to the branches. I touched one with the back of my knuckle like it was a baby's forehead. The pianist knocked with a hammer in his hand and an apology on his lips because he'd borrowed mine and then used it to put up a shelf and then forgot which one belonged to which. He peered around me at the suitcases finally unpacked and the stack of cookbooks under the router. "Your Wi-Fi is the pun," he said, like this was a long-running joke between us already. He handed me a flyer for a salon night in his place, just neighbors, low-key, bring something you made. I brought the lemon cake in the bowl that hadn't held soil and tried not to live my entire life all the way up to the ceiling in one evening. People came with tinny instruments and a poem they were embarrassed about and a salad that was really just a citrus shrine. The pianist played a piece that had corners and then didn't, and when it finished no one said anything right away. Silence felt full, not like absence but like a held note. He tried to curve around the order with new shapes. A Venmo request came from a username I didn't recognize, for rug, with 7 sage green emoji in a row like that made it official. A postcard with no return address arrived with one line, "I forgive you," like a ransom note that wanted me to say thank you. I took a photo of both and uploaded them to the advocate's portal like I was paying a bill. I told my parents about the order only after it was granted. My dad said, "Good," and then, after a beat, "I'm proud of your mother's lemon tree, because sometimes people have to aim a word through a sideways window to hit it right." On a Tuesday, the bookstore woman with the paperclip in her hair looked up when I walked in like she'd been expecting me. She didn't ask me to sit. "The thing about doors," she said, unprompted, "is that hinges don't get credit. They do the quiet work. They take the weight." She fussed with a stack of journals until they lined up. "You've been a hinge," she added, and then smiled at me in a way that made me put my hand on the counter because my legs wanted to sit down all at once. I bought a pen that writes like it knows better and a second postcard with lemons because apparently I'm building a private shrine to citrus behind cupboard doors. The woman from the other department, the one who asked me to mentor her, sent me a note after our first call. "You said, you don't have to be brave to change, you just have to be willing," she wrote. I put it on a post-it where my fear usually sits. I read it on the train and had to blink a lot at nothing. At the next stop the car filled with a school's worth of teenagers and someone said, "I love this song," to a song I couldn't hear, and 3 kids in denim jackets sang the same wrong lyric at the same time and laughed like they'd invented joy. On Friday I stepped out of the elevator into a lobby that smelled like rain and printer ink and saw the head of people leaning against the security desk eating a banana like a nurse in a TV show who doesn't have time for food with utensils. She waved me over to tell me legal had sent another letter for the Venmo and the postcard, and building security had updated their do not admit list, and did I need anything else right now, beyond the ridiculous? I wanted to say a different life and then realized I was already in it. "I'm good," I said. "I have a lemon tree." That night, the first thunder since I moved growled outside like someone rearranging furniture upstairs. The lemon leaves shook their coins of water, through the wall, scales, and then not scales, a melody that climbed and put its feet exactly where it meant to. I lay back on my rug that is mine, in a room I earned and then chose, and let gravity be what it was instead of a threat. My phone, face down on the counter, stayed still. The future came in like weather you can smell from 3 blocks away. I cracked the window and let it in.